Welcome back, everyone, to Taming the Perilous Guy's 100 Days to Launch. This is the weekly interview series where we take you step by step through a debut author's journey from finished manuscript to cross-platform multimedia launch. That author is Dr. Phil Marshall. Phil is the founder of Spoken. It is an AI-driven narration platform for independent authors' audiobooks. And he is also the man behind Taming the Perilous Skies, Phil's debut novel, and the thing we're here to see and to talk about. How are you feeling today, Phil?
I'm feeling great. I've got a good friend on with us today, and so this will be a lot of fun. Glad to be back on day. I had to do a little bit of math in my mind. I think today is 72 days to launch. Does that sound
I
right?
believe that sounds correct, because I think we were 78 or 79 last week.
Which means we're kicking off week 5, and which means I need to get my butt in gear because I've got a novel that's launching on September 12th. So, yeah.
One of
Rapidly approaching. So for those who are kind of new to the series, as Phil alluded to, each week we're covering a different topic in this journey. We've covered things like inspiration, craft, when is your manuscript good enough or ready? We've talked about genre and market. Today, we're focused on technology. Today, we're talking about the inevitable force that technology is, and really you can't have that conversation without talking about AI. AI is the thing that brings the three of us together. It brought Phil and I together. And so at this kind of dawn of a new era, with AI and technology and the tools that are available to debut authors, really we're with one of the best, if not the best person in the world to talk about that new era. And so we're joined today by Elizabeth Ann West. Elizabeth is the CEO of Future Fiction Academy and the Future Fiction Press. Thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, about Future Fiction Academy, and some of the things you're working on with authors?
Yeah, sure. I met Phil last year in Vegas, and it was fantastic at AInarration, and we really hit it off, and we got to hang out again this year in New Orleans. So I'm really familiar with how Spoken Press is doing and doing great. Love that software. But I started publishing indie publishing in 2011 with my first book, Canceled. And so I've watched the technology really change and shift in self-publishing and digital publishing. A lot of authors forget the digital part of digital publishing, the technology aspect of it. And I remember hand formatting ebooks, for example, before we got ebook formatting software that was really accessible. People used to pay me to format their ebooks, for example.
Wow.
And then starting in 2022, I started experimenting with artificial intelligence, generative AI, just DaVinci 3. I published 3 books with generative AI words in them. My readers love them. And then at the end of 2022, I started teaching authors. I did a short spell with PseudoWrite as their community manager. And then we started Future Fiction Academy in May of 2023. And now we have 14,000 authors that are members of the Future Fiction Academy free course. And we have over 1,000 authors that have actually purchased courses. So this AI stuff is actually being adopted by a lot of creatives, even though maybe the rhetoric out there is like, don't touch it, kill it with fire. The truth is, on the back end, there's a lot of creatives that are learning about this technology because we're not going to be able to stop it. It is the future.
That's incredible, and that's one of the things that kind of popped out to me as I've met you a little bit and got to know you. It's like you're an early adopter, right? Like, as you said, like the rhetoric now, 3 years after you started playing with this tech, is kind of still a lot of kill it with fire, as you suggested. And so I guess what led you to dive right into that early adoption, to take that position and bring it into both your creative work and then start to kind of bring it out to writers and authors?
Yeah, so I think that publishing as a history has been very selectively available to people, shall we say. There was a lot of times there where certain content would not be published by big companies. Self-publishing came around, and all of a sudden there was open voices and things like that. Now suddenly you have genres that would not even be allowed to be in the store, in brick and mortar stores, are now suddenly available through ebook. And now there's a new revolution starting with audio. audio is like bringing people as readers who have never been readers before, and they're now identifying as readers. So I looked at AI as this new opportunity for voices who have never written before to actually be able to work with their great ideas with something that's a junior writer that is trained in craft, is trained on every editing book that's ever been in the public domain, and all the public domain books. And now we're watching writers who never envisioned themselves as being able to write a book, to be able to write a book. We're also looking at creatives who are brilliant creatives who already have careers. We all have this long list of books we wish we could write. And now suddenly they're realizing, I can do that. I can do 10 books a year. I can do 20 books a year, and at least get all of these ideas out on paper. So for me, I saw AI as a force to be reckoned with, a tool to harness, and neglecting it, it really felt like it would be at my peril by 2022.
I like that use of words, the at your peril, right? Neglecting it or ignoring it. There's something that you said that reminded me of an interview I saw, or I guess it was a recorded session with Leonard Bernstein. He was talking about Beethoven and the end of one of his symphonies. And he actually went through 3 different versions of how Beethoven had ended that symphony. And he said, okay, this one, was just too abrupt. And so he wrote it more flourishy. And then he went to the 3rd and made it even more abrupt than the 1st. And that was the right one. And that's the one that we all know. And Bernstein said that for the artist, for Beethoven, it was knowing the inevitability and realizing what that inevitability was. And so he was just actualizing inevitability. And so this kind of reminds me of that. I mean, Elizabeth, you are a entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. And so there's a lot of what we do that is just actualizing inevitability, right? Like we want to be the ones because we believe that it can be guided. We believe that it can help improve things. We believe the world can be better. We like actualizing what we know to be inevitable. And so I'm wondering what you think about that, the idea of actualizing inevitability.
I think there's another I word to throw in here with the inevitability, and I think that's iteration. And so the only way that you can, like you talk about Beethoven having those 3 different versions that he did, and then he realized the one that was going to have to go on. I think that for a lot of authors, there's a lot of different ways and iterations that you can write, or you can express your creativity. And I think that AI as a tool allows you to explore all of those iterations so that you are able to test and experiment like what entrepreneurs do. And then you find the path that it's lower cost in time, which time is like the biggest resource. Like we can't invent more of it, right? That's the most expensive resource. So AI allows you to have a shorter period of time to iterate and kind of discover that inevitability, where some people might be daunted or intimidated by that inevitability. Just like, I can't do it. It's not possible for me because I can't run through all the different options. And now you can.
I think it's an interesting thought there, because when I was saying inevitability, I was thinking about you and I actualizing the inevitability of AI playing a role, right? The technology playing a role, as opposed to the inevitability of that particular prose, right? That particular passage. I think that the inevitability of the art, like in the case of Beethoven, the iteration becomes a really key part of that. But I knew from early on that this technology, unlike throwing a manuscript over the wall at ACX and out comes what comes out, right? And maybe you've got a few tweaks that the narrator needs to make. No. So now with ebook formats and platforms and spoken, this work does not ever have to be considered truly done. It can be a living, fluid, improving thing. And if 8 years from now somebody says, "Oh my God, didn't you mean to use the word not right there?" I'd be like, "Oh my God, how is it after 8 years? Like nobody, caught that. Okay, now it's changed, updated." Right? I mean, it's like, when it's all in our control at such a fine level, that iteration, in order to arriving at inevitability, that iteration becomes possible, which means that the artistic process of craft can actually be a fluid, ongoing, and never-ending process for every work, as opposed to done, pack it off, good enough, done. What does done mean? Anyway, I'd love for you to react to that.
So perfect is the enemy of done, first of all. So now we don't have to be perfect, right? So
right.
Maybe it's never in its final version, and it can always be iterated off of, which, I mean, that's why we have derivative content. That's why we have public domain. Like, creativity for humans is like always this flow. It's always this thing that's always ever changing. I think that AI opens the door for a lot of experimentation and a lot of accomplishment. So like a lot of productivity. It's a productivity tool. You can actually get things to a done state that others can consume it and review it and comment on it and influence it. And so things are in flux. Even with spoken, audiobooks have always been considered the thing that gets done after the book is written, right? After the book is written, that's when you do audio. Now with spoken.press, we have authors who are able to test chapters that they've written and listen to their characters. And it's like a whole new world of, I can step into my story world before the story world is even finalized. Writing now is more a multi-sensory experience, because you can do so much more. I mean, authors, when I first started, everyone was about mood boards. And I hate to say it, we were cutting magazine pictures out. Like, this is pre-Pinterest, people. So now your mood board is actual media assets, this multimedia world. And that's there for the creator. Even if your discipline is writing, you now have tools that make audio accessible, make video accessible, make images accessible. And I think it's a really cool thing. It feels like a renaissance. It really does. It feels like a new age where we get to rewrite. And so in a lot of ways, yes, Phil, you're a debut author, but I'm a debut author in this new world where there's multimedia. And there's a lot of creatives who are going to they're going to have to shed some of their old restrictions from the old world, and they're going to have to be willing to kind of like go into this with new eyes, like a debut author would.
You both hit on this kind of theme of like I words, inevitability, iteration. I think another one that you just started to kind of build toward, Elizabeth, is innovation, right? All of this is kind of born out of innovation. And so you talked about these kind of multimedia tools that we have and that growing array of different things. So what are some of the I guess specific innovations that you're kind of targeting for your authors, your users, and the people that you're working with every day?
So a big thing about working with AI is there's like two schools of thoughts that have been kind of competing with each other. There's software out there that like pegs the author in and says, you're going to use our prompting. You're never going to know what the prompting is. You just click these buttons and you just like accept the magic. The Future Fiction Academy has been very different in that we have been transparent about our prompting from the beginning, because our belief is that authors should be iterating and innovating more prompting. And so from that, we've moved from what we call mega prompts, where we're just like context stuffing everything in, to these multi-step processes that is the easy peasy book machine, where you have your information, you ask it to make a plan to write a chapter, and then you write a chapter. So we're helping these creatives learn this technology at its core. And that's allowing them to have new ideas and stronger thoughts about how to use this new technology in a different way, in a way that the engineers who made this didn't envision, like did not even think that we could do it for that. So we use AI for everything from story summarization to exploring writing the scene from different characters' point of view, so that the author can really explore that story world or that moment in the story. There's also now, like I say, audio and visual. Authors, if they wanted to go find like an image of their character, they'd have to go through stock sites and all this other stuff. Now with like Midjourney and DALL-E, you just say what your character
Bring
looks
them to
like.
life, right?
Yeah, I want a scar on his left eye that comes into a T-cross and a tattoo here, and exactly. So now you can bring them to life, and that allows their readers to interact in a different way too. Readers have always made fan art and everything like that, and now that's gone to a whole nother level. Sure. with AI and what's available.
I'm curious, of your users at Future Fiction Press, and you've announced your first draft as well.
Yeah, your first draft.ai.
Yeah, your first draft at AI. So I'm curious, how many of those would you categorize as the yet to be published novelist? In other words, they're skating towards their debut.
So we have 270 people currently in our mastermind and accelerator. And from our research, 30% of them are working on their first book.
Okay.
So we're actually
Okay.
equal thirds.
Yeah. So interesting. So I'm curious on your perspective on this, and that is that I just was writing. I'm at mid writing my end notes, my acknowledgments, author note. As part of my author note on Taming the Perilous Skies, I say I waited until after the dawn of AI to publish this, so that you could accuse me of using AI to write it. But I want you to know that, in fact, every single word in this novel was written in the old-fashioned way, and came out of my noggin. I did use AI to help me generate ideas for the initial poem, very short 4-line poem that starts right before the epigraph.
Mhm.
And yet even those words I chose and I decided on, but that was the only place they actually used AI to help create words. And so I'm wondering what your perspective is on the debut author, and whether there is a necessary journey to go through, like I went through, the workshops, the craft, the hand, the artisanal,
Isn't.
what's that?
There isn't. Yeah, this is going
Okay,
to be.
so help us understand your perspective on that one.
Yeah, so here we go. Number one, we've all been reading since we were grade school age. So we all have tastes in our reading from a very early age. So whether you're coming into writing, whatever age you are, you have decades of experience in evaluating the written work. It's one of the few disciplines where people are coming in with extensive experience. Now, when it comes to writing, the OG creative writing courses, one of the first exercises you ever do is try to write like one of the masters. Same thing in painting, right? You have to paint like the masters, and then you get to do your own thing. AI has already been fed all of the masters. So you're literally working with a tool that allows you to find your authorial voice much faster. You can iterate a lot faster. I was having to rewrite the introductions to my first chapters on my first books over and over, like redo that introduction. Now you can ask the AI to write that introduction 5 different ways, kind of like what you did with the poem, and you are selecting and choosing and maybe kit bashing pieces of those together. The AI can't do it without you. But I think that AI as a tool allows that debut author to hone their craft faster and actually be better at crafting words than even people who took the longer route.
You're redefining what it means to be an author, I think,
Yep.
because in that world, the author is not focusing so much on craft as they are on finding their voice and being the filter for words,
Yes.
so that the inevitability of their story, their concept, their character arcs, their notion of that story is what ends up on that page, but without the necessity of the craft pain, I would call it, because I started Taming the Perilous Skies in earnest in 2017 going into 2018 in preparation for the Futurescapes writing workshop. I was admitted into the week-long manuscript writing workshop, and I thought that was to learn how to write a manuscript, and instead they had you submit your manuscript. I'm like, I don't have a manuscript. So for the next 6 weeks, I was like,
So my first book that I did, we did not have Grammarly yet. We did not have like these really awesome grammar checks and stuff. All you had was like Microsoft Word. There was no dev editing or any software or anything like that out there, like AutoCrit or ProWriting Aid. So I literally went to Kinko's and got my manuscript printed and spiral bound. I still have it to this day. And I red penned that thing to do the edits. So we don't do that anymore. I mean, and that's just a change since 2011. So that's just a change in 14, 15 years. What I hear you saying, Phil, to echo it, in the old world, the old way of doing things, an author could have authorial intent and write the books, but that book still had to go through editorial to get published. So even like traditionally publishing, authors could not just take what they wanted and like send it out. And then self-publishing opened the door for that more. And now with AI, these new debut authors, I'd almost say that they're debut editors. And I don't mean editors in the sense of like copy editing. I mean editors as in acquisitions at a publisher. Like they're making choices. They're more about the reading experience. That's why we always say it's a new skill set. And it's a skill set that not all of the authors are picking up as easily, because they're used to a world where they can do their thing, and then the editor is going to help them like focus their ideas and everything like that.
Well,
and now, go ahead.
Let's go with that one step further. So what role did the editor have? Well, the editor knew market. They were an avid reader of this kind of work. They were an incredibly valuable filter for what was going to resonate, what wasn't, for mistakes at the line level or at the developmental level. And so what does the debut novelist do in an era of AI? And ignore the line edit bit, but when it comes to, this work fits right into that market. I was going through Autocrit, and they provide a lot of that kind of feedback on what bookshelf it sits on and blah blah blah, which we covered a few weeks ago with actually Russell Novelty was our guest a couple of weeks ago on that, which was super interesting. But I'm wondering what you think AI will do to serve in that broader editorial function to actually say, well, readers of this genre are going to respond well to this, but you just lost them right there.
AI can actually answer that for you. It can now tell you where you've missed the trope, where you are falling down on expectations for a genre. You still need a human to evaluate that and understand, like, if it's because AI is always catching up, right? So for example, in publishing as a debut author, usually people write because there wasn't a book that they wanted on the market. There was something that they wanted and it wasn't there. So they start writing their stuff. I like this genre, but I want to do it my way. And that can actually create entirely new genres. Reverse harem came out as a completely different genre. Lit RPG has come out as a completely different genre.
I didn't know reverse harem was a genre. I thought reverse harem was just a critique of my character, Brian Medlock, and all of his pool boys.
No, we don't even call it reverse harem anymore. We call it why choose. Why choose?
Oh.
So, but there's all kinds of stuff. Cozy fantasy, and then like cozy mystery turned into all the witches, and it was paranormal cozy fantasy. Or cozy mystery. Like indies and debut authors have such an opportunity at coming up with new genre mashups and new things that were not even available 10 years ago. And I think AI is even going to hasten that innovation and hasten that iteration, because it allows the person who has a good idea to come to the table and play and publish and finish, get it into a done status that it can go to somebody else. And that wasn't available before. Writing was a very solo sport. It was lonely. And now everybody's got their own little buddy in ChatGPT that, if nothing else, can stoke your ego.
That's been a problem, actually. I put every chapter of Taming the Perilious Skies through a fine-tuned, not fine-tuned, but a personal GPT that it had been, it had learned about my style. This is what I'm after. These are the comps that I'm after. This is the bookshelf I'm after, right? And I had it evaluate every chapter, and then I had it do star ratings across four different dimensions of the work. And like some hand-clasped starlet, it was like, oh, we have never seen anything so good. I mean, you wanted to get Wells and Weir and Brown combined together, and nothing has ever been so good. Oh my God. And then it would say, but if I were to suggest one little thing, right? And so that's when you're like, oh, that one little thing is not a little thing.
No, it's not a little thing. But understand that for the debut author, you could not get access to that. Before AI, you had no access to that kind of feedback unless you could get an agent to read your book or go join some kind of group that actually can give good feedback, which that's rare and far between. Authors are sometimes the worst at giving feedback on the market.
Oh my God, I'm the worst. I'm the worst person. Everybody will tell you, like, Phil's the worst in critique. He's awful. He's useless.
I don't edit other people because I can't do it. I just like rewrite it. I don't edit other people because I would just rewrite it. So, I mean, know where your limitations are. So I would say that AI for the debut author, it's never been a better time. It's a renaissance. It's never been a better time to be a debut author because you have all these tools and things at your disposal. And quite frankly, I'm jealous. Okay. I had to go get the writer's market from the library. I had a paper thing to figure out all the people I could query when I was first starting my career. That's gone. That's all bye-bye. Like, you don't even have to do any of that anymore because you have AI that can help you optimize. And it's whatever your goal is, you know, you can come to AI with, my goal is to sell the most amount of copies of this, or my goal is to have this be the most perfect expression of like my own like mindset or whatever. I don't care. It's not going to sell. I want, you know, introspective lighthouse poems. That's what I want to do.
So a couple of comments. One is, as you were talking, I'm a product person, right? I'm a product guy to a fault, through and through. Everybody will tell you he's insufferable as a product person. And as you're describing this, you're like, okay, you've got the tools now. As an author, I see it as being more of like a product person, where you've got a lot of things that you're channeling to something that you know is the inevitable, I'll use that word, result of your work. That's that authorial intent. That's that voice. That's that story. And so becoming that assembler, that filter, that becomes a really, really interesting role to become as an author. But you talked about, I don't care if anybody reads this. And that becomes a real issue when quality works become now accessible or possible from those without having gone through the pain of craft. And so what happens with the market and the audience? What if the market is exactly as the market has been defined so far, and now we've got 10 times as much work? Is every debut novelist going to experience what so many do? And I really fear I will as well. And that is throwing something that may be quite good, but throwing it into the void.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a myth that somebody hits it out of the park with their debut novel. Every debut novelist has had a major marketing machine behind it. There was a whole hundreds of people behind it using their expertise and their wisdom and their networks to put that book where it is. If you are a debut novelist, that is not a career. So if you're looking at a career in this and like making inroads with audience, it's just like anything else that you're making inroads with audience. You're going to need to produce more than just one book. You're going to need to have content. And that's another place that AI can actually help that debut novelist to continue to produce, even if they have another profession or they have other constraints on their time. Authorship in the past has been a class of privilege of people who could afford to not work and write books, sometimes only one per year. And it wasn't really a profession that was designed for someone to do it on the daily. Then we saw the internet come along, and suddenly there's more copywriters, more SEO writers. The written word is getting out to everybody. And it became more of a profession. It became more, we've seen a lot more freelance writers, freelance authors, etc. And so I think the reality is, before AI, 90% of books did not become super bestsellers or anything like that. I don't think that changes. It's not going to change. But what is going to change is, because the margins on AI production is so low, like anyone can put a couple of hours in and make good quality content. It means that niches and mid-list markets that have been abandoned and neglected for generations are now an opportunity. You can now write that weird fiction and serve 500 readers on a regular basis. You may never be something that is going to make 5,000 readers happy or 50,000 readers happy. But if you can supply 500 readers a book 10 months out of the year, that's the same as 5,000.
I'd like to ask you one question on that, and that is short form versus long form. So, we're talking about novelists. Taming the Perilous Skies is 137,000 word doorstop. I mean, beautiful novel. And so it's a chungus, right? However, appetites of audiences, attention spans, TikTok era, that is at a potential mismatch for larger works. Now, there's still story. There's still having enough words to carry story across the finish line, right? And so I'm wondering what you think about the debut novelist and how we should think about our usual long form goal, right? Like the great American novel versus short form.
I think you need to think about that there's lots of formats now. There's serialization opportunities. Everyone thinks like short form, oh, Dickens was the king of short form. He was serializing really long novels inside of magazines. Now, you can't just take a novel and chop it up. That does not work. Or it doesn't work well, I should say. You could do it. Because serialization is an art form in itself, where you're making sure that there's like a cliffhanger to make somebody want to come into the next episode. But if you really want to do long form content, nothing stops you from thinking about that, because you should be thinking about that anyway, because your chapter should want to entice somebody to read the next chapter. There should be a hook at the end of these chapters to continue reading. So now you can write long, you can write short. It doesn't really matter. The delivery options are there. Whereas before, you may not have had access to serialization. You may not have had access to be able to reach readers who like these other different formats. And now that's democratized. And with AI, it's possible to be all things to all people. Whereas before, there would be a lot, like if you wanted to translate into another language, you'd have to hire a translator. You'd have to go through all of that. If you wanted to make an audiobook, I'd have to hire an audio engineer and hire a narrator and all that. I don't have to do that anymore. There's spoken.press that I can serialize this, or I can break it up, allow people to play with my work in whatever way that they want to come into it. So I don't think that we're in a situation of long versus short. I think we're in a situation of make as many formats as you can, reach as many readers as you can where they natively are. And that's possible now because you don't have the overhead of what that infrastructure used to require.
I think it also changes our writing.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. If you do multicast, and now every spoken dialogue phrase, you know who's speaking, dialogue tags are far less necessary.
Yes.
Now that's a multicast scenario. And spoken does, we're about ready to release a really major sort of transformation of the multicast, which is just going to be fantastic. I'm wondering though, like when we're talking about hooks at the end of chapters, make sure those chapters are able to, at least to some extent, stand on their own and want you to know what the, what the next thing is. How does writing change as we sort of forecast ahead?
I think it becomes more reader focused than, like, the author doesn't get to like exist in a bubble unless they just want to write it for themselves. There's nothing wrong with being an author in an audience of one. But if you truly want to not have the situation of a debut author that, you know, nobody buys my book, well, the easiest way to make sure somebody buys your book is to think about them in the first place. What do the people who want to buy your book need? I mean, you're a product guy, right? This is product 101, thinking about who the audience is. This is not something that authors in the past have had to do. Before, it was like, I just have to get one agent to like my book and they'll deal with all the rest of it. Or I just have to get one publisher to like my book and then they'll deal with it. Now, authors and readers are kind of in the boat together, and it's more of a symbiotic relationship than it ever has been before.
I love the entrepreneurial spirit of everything there. I think, you know, that's something that we're super attuned to and fans of at Spoken. And it's interesting. You know, I feel like the creative world has kind of evolved to, like, honestly forcing creatives to be more entrepreneurial. You know, that we as writers, creators, you know, whatever you are out there, like, we're asked to do more and more, right? Create visuals, create audience, you know, create all of these things. And, you know, I just love your embracing of the AI tool set to do that. Again, our kind of series here is focused on debut authors, and whether that's helping people across the finish line, helping them market, you know, anything, all of the above. Is there, you know, one thing other than, you know, joining Future Fiction Academy that that debut authors should be kind of looking at, that, you know, maybe you're seeing that it's like, hey, get involved in, you know, this, it doesn't have to be one thing, I guess, but, you know, well, what are some things that, you know, people really should be looking at in this moment right now if they're, you know, trying to get that first work out there?
So the advice I always give people trying to get their first book out there, this is going to be controversial, is make it something, I'm sorry, Phil, make it something you don't care about. Your first book is always going to be your first book. If what's hanging you up on getting it done is how you feel about it, give yourself the grace to get more experience and let that be book 5. Let that be book 10. Everybody forgets that Nora Robertson did not hit the New York Times bestseller list until her 32nd book. Right. So these are the insights that authors have to tell each other. And so if you're by yourself as a debut author, join a community, join, you know, a Facebook community, We both have YouTube channels and things like that, because we're going to support one another getting across that finish line. And so the best thing for a debut author to get across that finish line is pick a project that your only goal is to get across that finish line. It is not to write the great American novel or the best novel. Sorry, Phil, but how long have you been working on your book?
You know, so the concept, you know, for the theory of persistence was on 9/11, 2001. And so quickly after that, I knew the only way to bring that to life would be to write an interesting story around it. Legit craft process started in 2017 going into 2018. So a number of years, and no need to feel sorry that I put all the eggs in the first novel basket. But that's what I do, is I put eggs in baskets. I shouldn't put eggs in baskets, but I do that.
I think a lot of debut novelists think that, like, my first work has to be my best work. No, your first work just has to be your first one. It's never, like, my first book is never going to be as good as my 25th book. In fact, I have a book that I published that I don't even like, but my readers love very much, and that's their favorite book. And it's really funny. So what you think is your best, unfortunately, is what not is. You don't get to make that call.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think best versus first versus breakthrough versus, right. I think best becomes a little bit of our own enemy, right? I mean, you said it earlier, and while Taming the Perilous Skies is the centerpiece of the universe that I'll be creating, I don't expect for it to be the best on character arc or, you know, or anything else from a craft perspective, but is and will be the centerpiece of what starts the universe, you know. So
of course, I think you have realistic expectations, Phil. I think it's going to be successful no matter what. And I think that you're not going to give up. I know you're not going to quit. So getting it out the door is just step one of many.
Well, I sent it to the formatters right before this interview. So there you go. Yeah, September 12th. We're doing pre-sales at Worldcon, and
nice.
We'll have a booth
Amazing.
there.
So Elizabeth, and thank you so much for all of your insight and your time. This has really been fantastic. So, you know, I think AI, it's hard not to think and talk about the future. It feels like the future is now. It feels like the future is changing every single day. So let's jump 5 years in the future. And in your opinion, you know, the most common mode of generating and distributing a novel will be?
So I just talked with my team actually yesterday in our staff meeting about, like, what will still be there in 15 years? What will still be there in 10 years, 5 years? And it's always going to be content. I mean, we're not even using the same AI software and AI techniques that we were using 6 months ago. So, but the thing that persists, the thing that stays is the story. So what is story creation going to look like in 5 years? We're already experimenting with almost like a Mad Libs kind of situation with your first draft, where people can come in and they fill in the worksheet, and then that worksheet turns into a prompt for the AI, and the AI starts building their chapters one by one. I think that there's going to be a lot more immersive story multimedia, where maybe a creator starts the nexus of the story, but there's a lot of opportunity for other people to be involved in it, and story just becomes even more democratized. That's the trend I keep seeing more and more and more of. Story is becoming democratized, whether it's what languages it's translated in, what formats it's in, who's allowed to write those stories. That has been exploded in a good way, which it should be. So that's what I see in the next 5 years, is that AI is going to allow anyone to make stories, share those stories. And the good news is the final arbiters of quality will still be us, the humans.
That brings up that whole idea, again, as a product person, this is the way I think of iteration. And when I think product, I think MVP is, you know, oftentimes barely even stood up at all. It could be a slide that people are reacting to, in order, as I tell my team all the time, all we're doing in the free beta is about to end, by the way, but all we're doing in the beta is knowing where to put the next brick. We don't have a backlog. We erased the backlog. We got rid of the backlog function. Why? Because we don't believe in a backlog. I don't believe in a backlog no matter how big we might get. And here's why. Because all you're ever doing is putting the next brick in the road. That's all you're doing, is to know whether to put it slightly here or slightly to the right. And maybe the author's role is to approach story the same way. They're getting that MVP out, and then they're putting the next brick in the road. And that becomes a really interesting analogy and so different from the past.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you both for joining us. Thank those of you who are tuning in. And as always, keep an eye on Phil's socials, keep an eye on the Spoken.Press YouTube channel, and you will get more and more Perilous Skies as we march toward that launch coming up in September, coming up pretty quick. September 12th.
Thank you for reiterating that. Yeah. And thank you, Patrick, for leading us, and Elizabeth Ann. What a great chance to catch up and get your insights.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Spoken.